Car Con Carne, we are live on Facebook, still in quarantine. Quarantine Con Carne, sponsored by C&H Financial Services. As business owners continue to open back up to serve their communities, they're faced with a lot of challenges as they navigate through this new normal brought on by the coronavirus. C&H Financial Services is here to help. They offer a variety of products that range from traditional merchant accounts to a zero-cost payment processing solution, which eliminates the expense associated with accepting Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express as a form of customer payment. To learn more, contact C&H Financial Services at 855-600. That's for you, Chicago, Ronnie. 600-2437, or go to chfs.us. My guest right here, it is the lead singer of Kansas. It is Ronnie Platt. He's a Chicagoan. He's got pipes for days. Thank you for joining me, Ronnie.
C&H Financial Services.
There it is.
How you doing?
Hey, I love when advertising works like that.
Hey.
Hooks the band right in.
Made me write it down.
So we got you at a really interesting night, or on a really interesting night. Today, right, is your 6-year anniversary of starting with Kansas, like this exact day.
Well, actually, 2 days ago was my 6-year
anniversary week. There it is.
Anniversary week. There we go. Wow. I can't believe it. It's so strange. I have two perspectives. It seems like I joined the band 6 months ago because time has just gone by so quickly. But in other respects, I feel like I've always been here. You know, I was, before this thing all happened, I was quickly approaching my 500th show. And wow, it really is surreal. After 6 years, it's still surreal to me.
And once you join the band, I mean, it's like jumping on a merry-go-round. Like there's no time to catch your breath. You're touring, you're playing these big packages. It's nonstop.
Man, let me tell you, talk about jumping into the deep end. When I first met with Phil and Rich, they said, maybe we'll do 55, 65 shows a year. My first full year in Kansas, 98 shows.
Yeah.
The next year, 99. So it was really, wow, it's sink or swim. So a lot of fun.
So not only is this the anniversary week of you joining the band 6 years ago, we are on the eve of the release of the 16th Kansas album, The Absence of Presence.
Yeah.
I want to get to that, but first let's back up 4 years. Let's stay on this track of you joining the band 4 years ago. It seems like prior to the release of that album, there was a lot riding on it. It had been 15, 16 years between albums. Beyond the pressure of taking over as a lead singer, it seems like the album had to hit the right tone. It had to, hit your fans the right way, but also sound contemporary and forward thinking. Seems like a lot was riding on that.
Yeah. For Kansas to go, whatever it was, 14, 15, 16 years without releasing any new studio stuff, it really is amazing. And I think Rich and Phil still had that creative desire. They still needed that outlet creatively. So when Steve announced his retirement and I came in and Dave Mannion came in at the same time I did, we influxed the band with not only new energy, but a new way of thinking. One of my biggest problems is I never say no.
I think that's a Midwestern work ethic, isn't it?
It must be. I mean, whatever Phil and Rich wanted to do, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah. And I don't think they were used to that kind of enthusiasm. So 2014, wow, I find myself in the band. And then here I think I'm going to be doing, all this classic Kansas stuff. Talk about a band that just has a huge library of music to fall back on. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's all right there. What a surprise to me to find out Phil and Rich wanted to do a new studio album, and that was the Prelude Implicit, and do that. And wow, what a trip. And then, that comes out and does so well. comes out number 14 on the Billboard Top 200. Really? A band from the 70s comes out that high on Billboard 200? Pretty amazing, you know. And I think it was really shortly after that we immediately started thinking about another album, and you know, hence the Absence of Presence, coming out tomorrow.
Staying on the Prelude Implicit just for a second, we talk about hitting the ground running with the band. The Voyage of 818 to me is one of the standouts on that album. I mean, It's just this big sprawling prog rock piece. That's Kansas.
It sure is, and it's 8 minutes and 18 seconds long.
Because of course it is. But I mean, that same album, you've got Visibility Zero, which totally rocks. I also love Crowded Isolation, which is a nice slow burning song. I mean, just solid stuff. And if I can be music nerdy for a second, that album, The Absence of Presence, which comes out tomorrow, my God, the production on both albums sounds so fantastic. It is just so big and stellar. Not to get too nerdy or going down that rabbit hole, but
no. And on the Prelude Implicit, you've got two kings in the industry, Jeff Glicksman, for one, and Zach Risby. And Zach Risby did all the production on The Absence of Presence. While you talk about two guys that have their act, I almost said another word, act together.
It's a podcast. I mean,
right. I can say shit.
Okay. We don't need a standing ceremony, Ronnie. Come on.
So, but just great production and great producing. And boy, let me tell you, Zach Risby, work ethic like no one I've ever met in my life. When we recorded this album, we were not only were we touring at the same time, but here we're trying to record this album, and we were at the studio in Atlanta. We were there every day, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, probably there till 6, 7 o'clock at night. Zach wouldn't even come to dinner with us on the way back to the hotel. We go right back to the hotel, and he would go up into his room, and he had his computers set up in the room, and he would comp what we did that day till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning and get up and do it again and again and again. And I'm like, Zach, you're my idol. I don't know how you do it.
I get it though. Once you're in that mindset, once you're in that headspace, you got to see it through. I totally get it.
And that was part of it, because we were touring at the time, and it was such a level of intensity that you can't help but have tunnel vision, because time doesn't allow you to think about anything else.
Right.
So whatever we did, it turned out great. We're really happy with the end product. That's for sure.
Album number 16 from Kansas, The Absence of Presence. From what we've heard so far, Memories down the line, it's just you and a piano to start. I mean, this is a wonderful, talk about a slow burner, slow build into what it sounds like Kansas music. You've got the violin, the drums, the guitar. It's a fantastic song.
It really is. And that's, it's stereotypical of what you get from a Kansas album, and that's diversity. You have a song like Throwing Mountains, which is just in your face, heavy rocker.
Well, there are multiple layers to that one. It has a really dramatic build to it.
Dynamics all over the place in Throwing Mountains. Just a really heavy. I know a lot of my friends, a lot of people I talk to are calling it progressive metal. That's how heavy that song is.
Yeah.
But, as you go through the album, you have that at one end of the spectrum. And at the other end, you have songs like Memories Down the Line and Never that are really heartfelt ballad type songs, with real deep meaning. Whereas a lot of Kansas songs have that ambiguous, you don't really know, what is the lyrics really saying, and leaves it to self-interpretation, which is great, but really a wide spectrum and variety of music on this album, and stereotypical for Kansas.
Speaking of Kansas lyrics, is it okay if we don't listen to Dust in the Wind until after this pandemic's over?
No.
Fair enough.
No. Where have you not heard Dust in the Wind? The elevator, the grocery store, the clothing store. You've heard it everywhere.
It's just such a heavy song. It's tough right now.
Yeah, right. Don't make me cry.
Exactly. Going back to the new album, again, out tomorrow, The Absence of Presence. Jets Overhead, obvious single. It's melodic. The video is trippy as all get out.
Right.
Nice distraction if you're sheltering at home. You got nowhere to go. Tune in, drop out a little bit with Kansas. On. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting to say the least, isn't it?
I love it. So how long in sum did it take you and the band to put this album together?
Probably from the very, very first conception by Zach, probably a year and a half, maybe a little more. Zach, he comes up with the musical foundations and sends them off to everybody, and everybody starts adding their own flavor to it. And Zach will send me a track with the melody on it, and I'll write lyrics, or Tom wrote a lot of lyrics on this album. And each song seems to take on a life of its own. And depending on the theme of the song and where we're going with it musically, kind of dictates of how we execute it.
And how do you challenge yourself vocally? I'm assuming as you tackle some of these songs, you want to push yourself and spread out more. What did you do on this album that might be an example of that?
Wow. In the studio when we're recording this, we were so experimental and doing stuff over and over and over again, and just finding that right combination that works. And, you've got, I'm singing parts, and then also singing the harmonies, but Billy Greer will be singing the harmonies. And it's trying to find that magical blend of me, Billy, Tom, Rags, Zach, if we're all doing vocals. It's trying to find that real sweet spot of mixing everything, and it takes time. And of course, I want to push my boundaries. I always said my singing, I never sing the same thing twice the same. I'm always shooting from the hip and pushing myself, to change things, or thinking on the fly. So I do that live a lot. But also in the studio, I'd be singing something in the studio, and, Zach would, come in on the talk back and say, "That was great. Keep that, do that again." And sometimes it's like, you did it so unconsciously. It's like, what did I just do? Play the tape back. Let me hear what I just did,
That's the beauty of the creative process.
Yeah.
I love it. So it's almost a cliche question to bring up now, but it's fair to ask because the album's coming out tomorrow. How do you feel putting out an album in a world where you can't tour behind it?
It's bittersweet. It really is, because we want to give our fans something in lieu of not touring. But it's really disappointing to me. We were supposed to be out with our friends Europe and Foreigner right now. We had a super intense schedule this year with, we were doing the Jukebox Hero tour with Foreigner, doing more dates around the States, and then also going to Europe. And that's, it's all been put on ice.
Yeah.
And, I'm asked a lot, well, when do you think you're going to be back? And it's out of our control.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if you could answer that?
Oh, I would love to answer. I wish I could say tomorrow. Yeah. I really wish I could, but it's the powers that be that, have things under control, and it's out of our hands.
For sure. So that's on hold. The album is out. It'll be streamable everywhere tomorrow. As the new kid, or a new kid in the band, Kansas started in 1974. 3 sextuple platinum albums. There was the turn in the 80s, a more pronounced turn towards Christian rock. The band stopped recording for the beginning of this century. Now it's back full swing. There's a lot of history to the band, and I think Kansas means a lot of different things emotionally, spiritually, to a lot of different people. How much do you think, or do you consider Kansas's legacy and pop culture tentacles as you make your way through the band?
Well, one thing I can't stress enough, if you're a Kansas fan, and even if you're not a Kansas fan, get the DVD, the documentary Miracles Out of Nowhere. And it tells the story of how the band got started in Topeka, Kansas. And talk about 6 guys with such insane talent being as far away from the music business as they possibly could. What the heck was in Topeka, Kansas in 1972, 73, 74? I don't see too many music scouts,
Right.
hopping on a plane and going to Topeka, Kansas, but it really is a great story of how the band got started. And it's really just one segment of Kansas, because, through personnel changes and genre changes in the music industry, the hair. I am a self-admitted prog snob. I've always been a prog rocker, always a huge Kansas fan. I loved Yes, I loved Genesis, I loved Rush. And I kind of didn't pay too much attention to the hair band era. In hindsight, they all did great things. You can't argue with success, but then the grunge thing came along, still didn't grab my attention. And it's funny, when I grew up, I think about how radio was when I was a kid and living in Chicago and listening to WLS, WCFL. I'm sure you know those stations.
Absolutely.
And back then, when I was a kid, it was so wild. You would hear a Rolling Stones song, and then you would hear a Jackson 5 song, and then you would hear a Carpenter song, and I'm really thankful for hearing radio back then, because it gave me such a wide variety, such a wide spectrum and understanding of music. Whereas today, when you listen to the radio or you go into, satellite radio, everything is so streamlined and you're not exposing yourself to other things.
I'm going to go down this rabbit hole with you, Ronnie. I think one of the biggest challenges for music consumers now is that there aren't enough obvious curators. I mean, the era you're talking about, growing up listening to music, everyone kind of listened to all the same thing. I heard Point of No Return on WLS for the first time and Carry On Wayward Son. People are getting their music and information from so many different sources. It's hard to have that kind of consensus. It's hard to kind of tap into that anymore because there aren't enough curators. I mean, music is curated digitally. I've got recommendation engines on Spotify and my Google Music. And I think that's a missing piece right now. Just to kind of,
I agree. I agree. So, reverting back to, the band in the 70s and stuff, it just made such an impression on me. And I was a prog rocker continually through all this time. And, the stages that Kansas has gone through, their heyday in the 70s and carrying that on into the 80s. Billy Greer.
This album did okay.
Right, it did okay. Hey, you know what? Hold On has kind of become my signature song, so, but in the 90s, Billy refers to that as the dark ages. Tough times for the band, but you got to really hand it to Phil and Rich, because they stuck it out and they wanted to keep Kansas going, and thank God they did.
Well, any band around as long as Kansas is going to have a dark period or two.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, the band's lived a couple lifetimes already. I mean, there are going to be incredibly high peaks and some valleys along the way.
James, the band is knocking on the door of a half a century.
It's amazing.
I mean,
so that begs the question, Do you remember when you first heard Kansas?
Carry On Wayward Son on the radio. I mean, probably hanging out at my buddy's house. And God, what would I have been? Freshman year of high school or sophomore year of high school?
Listening to this.
Listening to that. And and going and buying that album. I didn't even own a turntable. My sister had the old Panasonic 8-track radio tuner and turntable Sweet. All in one.
Oh yeah.
All in one. And how she let me in her room to abuse her stereo system. And I probably listened to that album over and over a million times. Times.
You singing that album has been committed to audio tape. I mean, it just what a great job you've done with it, with the classic music as well as this new stuff.
Yeah, thanks. Doing the 40th anniversary of Left Overture. Another story for you. When I know when Phil and Keith, our agent, when they talked about, hey, maybe we could play the entire album. Let's see, what kind of market it goes over in. And they thought, maybe we'll do 12 shows, 14 shows, maybe 15 shows for the 40th anniversary Left Overture. Yeah, ended up being over 80 shows. Sure. And now doing the same thing with Point of No Return, since that's in 40th anniversary, or we should say probably 42nd anniversary by now, we have long surpassed the Left Overture mark. Mm-hmm. And when we come back, we're still going to be doing that show.
It's amazing.
40th anniversary of Point of No Return.
On behalf of all music fans, I want to say yes to album plays. Love the album plays.
Yes.
Because it's stuff that we fans never get to hear live and never have heard live before. It's those deep cuts.
Right. And that's another thing I'm guilty of. I'm a deep cut guy. I love the stuff they play on the radio, but I love the stuff they don't play on the radio even more. And I've always been
because growing up, that's the test of your fandom, right? Being able to talk with your friends about it. Oh, yeah, you like that song. What about this song?
Right.
Oh, you haven't heard that?
Exactly.
Hang on, give me 4 minutes. We're going to listen to that. That's the best. That's fandom.
Or being a musician and hanging out with your musicians buddies, you'd be like, hey man, I figured this part out, do you know this song? And one led into another.
You mentioned Foreigner earlier. Did you audition for Foreigner?
I did. How ironic. I started a cover band back in 2004, and we did a set of Bon Jovi, a set of Journey, and a set of Foreigner. And my bass player, who was running our website at the time, calls me up one day and he says, hey, this guy has contacted me a couple times. He wants to know if you'd be interested in doing some commercial work. So I finally told him I would, give you his number. So I'm like, yeah, hey, you know what? I like to eat.
Exactly. Work is work. Absolutely.
Earning money is not a bad thing. Long story short, I'm on the phone with Jeff Jacobs one day, who I did not know was the keyboard player at the time. And he says, Ronnie, I got a level with you. I'm the keyboard player for Foreigner, and we're looking for a new lead singer. And this is like the day before. He had a studio right at Grand in Halstead. I don't know if he's there anymore. I haven't talked to him in years. But here I go to his studio, and honestly, I was kind of skeptical because, good God, I mean, I've been singing around Chicago. I think I probably did my first bar gig in like 1980. So I've been around for a while, and you kind of get thick-skinned to people that talk a lot of bull. Mm-hmm. So I really was skeptical. But then I walk into Jeff's studio, and here is this big plaque on the wall with a platinum album on it that says, thank you to Jeff Jacobs from Billy Joel for assisting keyboard playing on one of Billy Joel's album, and I'm like, this is the real deal.
Oh yeah.
And I did the song Urgent.
Mm-hmm.
He had me do Urgent, and it was so funny. My buddy Dan came with me. We drove down together, and I'm in the studio room, and I could see Dan and Jeff Jacobs in the control room, and I sing like the first verse of Urgent, and I'm like, I see Jeff turn around to Dan and like go, holy shit, this guy can sing, you know? And I did that song and came out of the recording room, and he goes, do you know any other Foreigner songs? And I'm like, name it. Name it. So yeah. So I ended up like singing 15, 20 seconds of, Feels Like the First Time, Long, Long Way from Home. And at that time, I think Mick Jones had already committed to Kelly. And at the time, on my resume, all it said was cover band singer from Chicago. Right. Kelly was in a signed band that had some modest sales. Kelly was the pro guy to go to. Right. So I really didn't put a lot of weight in getting that job, but I really can't complain with how things turned out.
This is a classic example of things happen for a reason. I mean, if you believe that, I mean, here we are.
Yeah. And you know what? In this business, you have to be thick-skinned.
Oh my God.
You have to take rejection and use it in a positive way.
Or find the positive in that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it didn't work out with Foreigner, but here's what I learned from that experience. Here's what I can take into my next experience.
Yeah, but before that, actually going back a few more years, I had an opportunity to become the lead singer of Survivor. And I got so excited about that. I mean, and it's like I jumped in head first and got so excited. And when it didn't come to fruition for me, I really got disappointed. And so that kind of tempered me for things in the future that, you know what, I'm going to try and reach for that brass ring. But if I don't get it, I can't let it, affect me that much, because that's part of this business. There's a million musicians wanting one position.
Right.
And it's a tough business. But wow, a couple years later, mutual friend here in Chicago, John Shank. John, how are you? If you're listening out there. Hey, Ronnie, I have a mutual friend. Have you ever heard of the band Shooting Star? And I'm like, had the album Hang On For Your Life, played it to death.
I was going to say Shooting Star has always done well in Chicago. I mean, Last Chance, Hollywood. I mean, those were all radio songs.
Absolutely. I remember Chicago radio played the heck out of Shooting Star. I remember hearing Flesh and Blood. I remember hearing Last Chance, Breakout, Hang On For Your Life. These were all tunes that were on Chicago radio and made me go out and get the album.
For sure.
So 2007 to 2011, I find myself the lead singer of Shooting Star. The ironic thing is, now I'm the lead singer of Kansas. How does a guy from Chicago end up in not one, but two bands from Kansas that have violin players? It's really, I mean, what are the
typecasting?
odds?
It's totally typecasting at this point.
Right.
It's like De Niro in
typecasting.
It's like De Niro or Pesci in a mob movie. That's just the way it's going to be for you for the rest of your musical career. So where did you grow up in Chicago?
You talking to me?
Where did you grow up in Chicago?
I grew up in the town of Bellwood, not one of the bigger towns, but surrounding towns are like Westchester, Hillside, Melrose Park, straight west on the Eisenhower, straight west of the city. And that's where I grew up. And my mother still lives in Westchester today. Bought the house in Westchester in 1982, which I probably lived there for about a year, then moved out. And my mom's still there, and now I live in Lombard.
Oh, you do? That's amazing. I just assumed you'd, I don't know, leave Chicago for somewhere else.
Everybody thinks that. When I'm out and about, where are you living now? same place I've lived for the last 20 years, Lombard. Really?
They've got a half price books over there. They got everything out
it's
there.
The Lilac Village. Come on.
It's the
Lilac Village.
So tell me about your Chicago-ness. What do you love about being from this area?
It's something that I wanted to ask you. And being around the country and halfway around the world now, boy, when you think of Chicago, you think of the best food in the world. And I got to ask you, have you ever been to my favorite place in the world, Chicago Pizza and Oven Grinders?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
2121 North Clark.
Absolutely. That is old school. Absolutely.
Been going there since 1987.
Nice.
One of my favorite places in the world, but of course, Chicago, the food and just the Chicago skyline, Navy Pier, which I played on Navy Pier. Oh my God, 50 times at least. It's just such a beautiful city, beautiful skyline, a lake that looks like an ocean. And there's some really beautiful places in this country. And I put Chicago up there in the top 10.
There's something to be said for being away from this area for a while, be it, on tour, on vacation, whatever. And if you're driving back or just getting out of Midway or O'Hare and hitting the highway and catching a glimpse of the skyline for the first time in days or weeks, it is breathtaking. As cheesy as it sounds, you realize what a muscular, powerful, impressive city this is. And it really is.
Yeah.
There's a visceral thrill, I think, to glimpsing the skyline after being away from it for a little while.
Yeah. One of the best views is when you're out on one of those dinner boats or tour boats that goes out, maybe a half mile or mile beyond Navy Pier. And it's nighttime and you're looking back at the Chicago skyline. It's really breathtaking. It's a scene that you're not going to see anywhere else.
So again, the new album, The Absence of Presence, the new Kansas album, the 16th, is out tomorrow. So we can listen to it then. Before I let you go, Ronnie, I know you've done the 7th inning stretch at the Cubs. You did a whole lot of stuff at a Cubs game, right? You did
throwing out the first pitch twice. Perfect strikes, might I add.
You practiced before then, didn't you?
Are you kidding? Of course I did.
Yeah, you don't want to blow that.
Yeah, you're gonna want. I got to tell you that story quick of when the first time JR, our manager, called me and said, "How's your throwing arm?" I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, I talked to the Cubs front office. You want to throw out the first pitch? I'm like, hell yeah. A week later, he goes, hey, you're singing the 7th inning stretch. And I'm like, take me out to the ball game. Piece of cake. I know it. And for I knew about a month in advance, at least maybe a month and a half. And I'm telling my friends, yeah, I'm singing, take me out to the ball game at the Cubs game. You got to come out. And they're like, wow, that's really cool. Are you nervous? And I'm like, nah, I'm not nervous. Now, if I was singing the national anthem, I'd be crapping in my pants. James, that morning, the morning I'm going to Wrigley Field, JR calls me and said the Cubs front office called him. The girl that was singing the national anthem couldn't make it. Could I please do it? Am I going to say no? Of course not. But I was, oh my God.
It's almost better.
Adrenaline through the roof. And it was so wild to walk out there.
Sure.
And I end the very, oh, say, can you see? And in that breath, I hear nothing. I hear no one clapping, no one talking. The only thing I hear are the flags out in the outfield. It was absolutely wild. And I'd love to do it again, Cubs front office.
I'm sure it was almost better that you didn't have time to prepare. It's one of those things like, if you're doing something scary or intimidating, just let me do it. I don't want to think about it.
Would have killed me.
Mm-hmm.
The anxiety would have killed me.
It's like,
40,000 of your closest friends being totally silent.
It's like riding a roller coaster. I would ride them more often if I could just start at the top of the roller coaster.
Right.
It's that climb up where you're kind of looking down. Yeah, exactly. If you could just drop me at the top, that'd be great.
Right.
Same type of thing. All right. Again, the new album, The Absence of Presence, the new one from Kansas. Thank you for putting out music in this time of quarantine when we are starved for new music, when we're starved for new Kansas music. It's awesome stuff. I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing. Truly a pleasure to meet you. And
same here. And thank you so much for having me on. The band is so excited about this album. Out tomorrow, folks. Go grab it. It is just total love to the ears is what this album is. The Absence of Presence. Please pick it up, and please, all my friends here in Chicagoland and everywhere, visit me on Facebook and also visit kansasband.com.
All right. Well, when this whole dark cloud lifts, when we emerge from our dystopia, Ronnie, we're going for oven grinders. We're going to make that happen.
You're on. Oh, Mediterranean bread and chef salad, man. It doesn't get better. I just ate dinner and now I'm hungry.
There it is. All right, I want to thank, we had a lot of people watching on Facebook tonight. Thank you everybody for watching. This will also be, in addition to Facebook, it'll be on YouTube and the audio podcast on carconcarne.com later. Thank you everybody. I'm going to kill the social media feed right now.